Everyone, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation given by Mr. Patak.
Dear Lord, as we meet today, please be with us. Guide our thoughts, ideas, and decisions. Bless abundantly all who are present. Come be with us, inspire us, and lead us in our time together. We ask this in your name. Amen. Amen.
Our first item of business this evening is election of officers. We will need a motion and a vote for chair, and we will also need a motion and a vote for vice chair.
I'd like to make a motion that Mr. Patak will be the chairman of the 2024 Planning Commission for Goochland County.
And I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and then we need a motion and a vote for vice chair.
I'll make a motion to approve Mr. Cosby as vice chair.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Mr. Patak.
Thank you. First item is approval of minutes. I know all of you hadn't been here, but we need to approve those minutes anyway. So if there's a motion to approve minutes,
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the March Planning Commission meeting.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Citizen comment. Would anybody like to come up and speak about anything on their mind other than business tonight? Okay, we'll close citizen comment. And Ms. Parker, do we have any requests?
We have no request to defer additions, deletions, or changes to the order of the public hearings. Our first public hearing item tonight is in District 3, CU 2024-7, application by Tamara and Douglas Adams, DBA Adams International School, requesting to renew conditional use permit CUP CU 2013-3 for a school, bed and breakfast, day camp, and public assembly place on 126.8 acres at 1655 Broad Street Road on tax map numbers 3210770, 3210777A, 3210777B, and 3210777C. The property is zoned agricultural limited A2. A CUP is required by County Zoning Ordinance Section 15112 in accordance with Section 15285G and 15290. The comprehensive plan designates this area as rural enhancement area.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Members of the Commission, Tom Coleman, Principal Planner. As Ms. Parker said, this is a renewal of a CUP. A little bit more complicated than some. It's 4 different uses. They were approved at 2 different times in the past, 5 different buildings. But stick with me, and I think we'll get through this. I might be a little deliberate over a couple of the items just to try to make sure that we understand what the application is. This is centrally located in the county, just west of the Oroville interchange. Looking at the aerial photograph, you can see that there's a sort of a rural character, rural residential character to this area, being on the south line, really sort of the southwest quadrant of Broad Street Road and Fairground Road. It does abut 2 subdivisions, including the preserve at Deerfield to the south and Bridgewater to the north. Looking at the comprehensive plan, the subject property and most of the surrounding properties do share a rural enhancement area designation. There's a designation for some undeveloped property to the east along Fairground Road. The subject property and many of the surrounding properties are also zoned agriculturally. There is some residential zoning to the south and to the north that are associated with the preserve at Deerfield and Bridgewater. Just a brief history of the site. There was a CUP approved for a school and a day camp that was originally approved in 2009. There was a public assembly place. Public assembly place is our zoning term for like wedding venues, event venues, and things like that. That and a bed and breakfast were approved in 2013. The applicants reside on the property and operate the school and the wedding event venue, and they also own the property across the street that's known as the South Sears property. With this application, the applicants did not request any changes to the operations or the facilities, and this is the first renewal that they've come before the county since their 2013 approval. Looking at some of the pictures of the buildings and some of the activities here, I think I have this right, but I'm sure the applicant will correct me if I've misidentified any of these activities. But we'll get to kind of a blow-up of the aerial photo in a moment. The school barn is really probably the largest structure on the site. They do use the upstairs for some school-related activities and maybe some of the special events. And the downstairs has some school uses and some office-related uses. When we get into the conditions, and I'll get into more of this in a minute, this is one of the larger buildings and has some larger drain field capacity, so it does offer a little more flexibility maybe than some of the other structures on site. They also have something called the Red Barn, which is located in close proximity and sort of just south of that. That's also used for special event activities. You can see from their photo, there's a cleared area around it, and that's used for outdoor activities. There's also something referred to as the Little Red Schoolhouse. That's used for school activities. There's a guest house. The guest house may be used for overnight stay or may be used for wedding-related activities, like if the groom are getting dressed or something like that, they may do that here. The main house, where the applicants live, they have a variety of activities there. They might have a wedding party, maybe getting dressed in the basement or something like that. So they do have some of the activities that may take place in the main house. And these two uses are also part of all of the uses are sort of maybe related to the wedding venue or the school, and these two are really just for the bed and breakfast approvals. Looking at the aerial photos starting from the west, you can see where the main house is located. You can see it, I guess first of all, these buildings are sort of spread out on the site. Look at the aerial photo, there are some forested areas that kind of separate all the structures on the site from the subdivision to the south. And there's also some forested areas along Fairground Road and wrapped around the west, and just see to the top of there, the top corner of the page along Broad Street. And the buildings are, like the main house, again, that's where the residents reside, the applicants reside, and also some of the wedding activities or bed and breakfast activities may take place at that location. And you move further over where the school barn is, again, that's where the larger building is located that has the larger drain field capacity and allows for a larger occupancy and more activity to take place. The Red Barn located just behind that. Moving further to the east, the Little Red Barn, that is probably more associated with school activities, and then moving to the farthest to the right, and I've tried to label these all in red, that there's that guest house that is the smaller guest house that also may be a bed and breakfast or used for some of the wedding venue activities. And there's another structure on the site that's not associated with these activities. The closest structures shown on here to really the more active location where the barns are, it's about 900 feet to the closest residences, the closest dwellings there, and the absolute closest dwelling is from where the main house is, about 650 feet. Just give you an idea of where the closest residents are in proposal to these active areas that are part of their application. This isn't real clear, but this is the POD plan. This really sort of focuses that they do have their emergency entrance. It is important for a lot of these wedding venue, public assembly place locations that they have safe ingress and egress for our fire rescue and emergency equipment. This is really mostly provided from their western entrance. And this does sort of show the barn area, the parking area, the Red Barn is to the south, and the Little Red Schoolhouse and the other structure. They can use both entrances, like for activities if they choose, but they do have to have that one entrance that's improved for fire rescue equipment, and that is their western entrance. They had a community meeting in December. 2 citizens attended and just had a couple questions for the client about how they enforce the CUP conditions and if they were proposing any changes to their application. I'll let you stare at this slide for a moment. This really talks about, we sort of have compared selected CUP conditions as it relates to some of the other the wedding venue type activities. The first line, you'll see that not all the CUP applications are the same. This happens to have the wedding venue, the bed and breakfast, a school, and the camps. Typically, the other ones will only have the wedding venue, or maybe only have a wedding venue and a bed and breakfast. So not all of these event venues are an apples-to-apples comparison as far as the types of uses they have on site. This does have the largest limit on potential guests at 700. That was what was approved in 2013. And also another thing too is that a lot of times when these applications, and the commission will probably see this in the future, when applications first come forward, they might be a little more restricted, and they're typically given a 5-year approval. That provides them, because they haven't been in operation and there is concern about their impacts on the community, they might tend to be a little bit more restricted. All of these uses have come back for renewal before, or actually, this is their first application. The other ones have been for renewal. So a lot of times they will get a little relaxation on some of these, the number of activities, the capacity, or things like that. They might get a little bit of a relaxation after they've demonstrated that they can operate in compliance with regulations, and they're not impacting the community, and they're not generating costs to our public safety agencies. One of the big concerns with these types of activities are amplified sound, and typically they will be regulated, number one, by limiting when they can have outdoor sound. For this application, they can have it Friday, Saturday, and Sunday only, and it has to be oriented towards Broad Street. But that's the type of how that's handled. It can be different from application to application, but for this one, they do have to orient it towards Broad Street. The limit on the number of guests, the next one is at what point they have to have a security guard. Typically, it's 100, 150. If they have fewer than that, they don't have to have a security guard present. But at that threshold, with alcohol or music or with paid admission, they'll have to have security on site. And you'll see that condition later on. This one does restrict fireworks. The traffic study, you'll note it says contingent on there. That was really related to the school. Once the school got to a certain size, they would have to do a traffic analysis. They haven't reached that size yet, so they haven't had to do that traffic analysis. Typically, we would not require these uses to do a full TIA, but we will look at things like either history of accidents, maybe some turning movements. We'll pick out a couple of traffic impacts and have them analyze that, but they haven't reached that threshold yet that they were originally approved for in 2013, so we haven't required them to do their traffic study. The last thing I'll point out is just the acreage, that 126 acres. This is a little larger than some of the other venue sites. But as you can see, most of them range from about 50 to 100 acres, Bandits Ridge being a little bit smaller. And I will point out just quickly, the Bandits Ridge is actually in their pre-application phase, so they will be coming to the commission probably in the next 2 to 3 months. They're not required to come through. They want to make some tweaks to their CUP application, maybe add a use or two. So just a heads up that the Bandits Ridge will probably be before the commission in the next 2 to 3 months. As far as the conditions, and there's no individual condition that's particularly complicated, but there's a little bit of commingling of all the different uses here. So I'll try to be a little bit deliberate through this, and feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. But for the first one, simply would allow the uses that are stated. The public assembly place and the bed and breakfast have some additional development standards in the code, and that's what's referenced in here, the section 15285G and the 15290. You'll see the requirement for a conceptual plan and a POD omitted. They've already gotten approval for those, so the condition is updated to say instead of they shall submit, they shall comply with. So you'll see the number 2 sort of has replaced shall submit with they shall conform to the site plan that they got approved. It's sort of similar with the building code, that they shall comply with shall comply with the building code. They've gotten all their permits. They've been operating in compliance with their permits. So they just have to continue operating in compliance with their permits. What is in the yellow box there, that is not, that's just for clarification purposes. It's not actually a part of the application. The next couple of CUP conditions deal with occupancy from the building official and the health department. So I just want to kind of spell this out a little bit separately before getting into the commingling. Hope this makes it a little more straightforward. This really relates to the school barn, what I mentioned earlier is like the biggest building on the site. They actually do have an occupancy there for 299 people. However, their drain field limitation is smaller than that. Their drain field was approved at up to 56 people, meaning if they have up to 56 people, they don't need to have porta potties or anything like that. If they want to have more than 56 people, then with the health department permit, they have to bring in porta potties, some type of portable sanitation. But the health department pre-approved them to expand that up to 150. To my knowledge, they haven't expanded it, but they pre-approved it. If they did expand their drain field, the health department would be supportive of up to 150 people. And if they chose to do that, then they would be allowed to have 150 people, and they would only have to get the porta potties if they exceeded the 150. But it's an overall building occupancy of 299, but a little sub, they're limited to 56 without bringing in the porta potties, and that's what's carried through in the next conditions. So with that, the bed and breakfast, you'll see this, the limitation of 10 persons, that's really reflects the building code. When you see these bed and breakfast type activities and these short-term rental, which is like the zoning term for like an Airbnb, those are going to be usually limited to 10. To exceed 10, it kicks in some additional building code requirements that from a feasibility standpoint makes it make more sense to remain at 10. So the bed and breakfast uses, the two structures that are approved, do have a limited of an occupancy of 10 for those bed and breakfast uses. Dropping a little bit further, that sees where the maximum occupancy for the school barn is 299 people. That following is that health code compliance, where they are limited to 56 people currently. But if they exceed 56, then they would have to have the portable toilets, porta potties brought in, and they could get approval for up to 150. The traffic, that's what I mentioned earlier, that contingent, if they exceed 100 students, then they would have to do a traffic analysis. And so we're carrying that condition forward, but they haven't invoked a need to do the traffic analysis. The signage, essentially unchanged, with just some freshening up the language. They are allowed to have 2 signs, and each sign would have to be less than 20 square feet in area. Fireworks are prohibited. They're prohibited from having any outdoor activities after 11 o'clock. Amplified music, as mentioned earlier, it's limited from Friday noon to Sunday at 7 p.m., and it has to be oriented away from the preserve at Deerfield, and which really orients it towards Broad Street. Again, with the parking, this really switches them over to maintaining their parking area and providing an overflow parking area, whereas before it was that shall provide the parking spaces. The lighting, the county does have a dark sky compliant ordinance that applies to anything that's really non-residential. It does not apply to residential, but when they install permanent outdoor lighting, it has to be a dark sky compliant, and this just requires them to submit a lighting plan for any permanent exterior lighting to demonstrate that it meets the lighting code. This restricts the number of activities they can have. They are limited to, if they have more than 50 people, they're limited to 60 per year. One of the things that all the applicants have to do is they have to annually submit to the planning office a list of their activities that they have, and then they typically will update that monthly as they add and subtract activities. So we do typically have a running total of how many activities they have and the number of attendees that they're expecting at these activities. Number 13 is what I referenced to about the security guard. At this situation, as it says here, they have to be present whenever they're charging admission or whenever they have music, alcohol, and more than 150 guests. And that can be either an off-duty deputy, or it can be from a security company that meets that code reference that's in the CUP condition. And that's sort of a more or less a standard condition that you'll see these whenever you have people congregating for an event. The limit on the number of guests. The access road, again, they have to maintain that inter-access road, the one I showed you earlier, and they have to meet both the fire rescue and the community development requirements for that. Of course, if there's any alcohol, they have to meet the ABC laws. There's a prohibition of discharge of firearms for the CUP-related activities. There's that next one is where they have to provide us with an annual notice of their activities. And these last two are sort of standard conditions as they relate to if the CUP goes with the land. So this just requires them, if they sell the property or lease the property, they just have to notify the county and provide evidence that they've notified the purchaser or leaseor that that these CUP exist. And the last one is the expiration date. Typically, when there's they did get approved for 10 years with their first application, and it's sort of, it's not unusual or sort of typical, we would add 5 years if they've demonstrated they can operate in compliance with the CP conditions, not generating any cost or public safety agencies, not that we're aware of, and, they're not generating impacts to the community, then let's stretch out for the next time they have to come forward to the county for a renewal. That concludes my presentation. I think I tried to make it as simple as possible, but if you have any questions.
I do. On the amplified music, it said Friday from noon till Sunday at 7. Are there more limits on the time of day for that music?
The other one is that all their outdoor activities have to stop at 11 o'clock.
So they can play from noon till 11 p.m.
Right. This, I mean, it would not prohibit the music indoors, but they couldn't have music outdoors past 11.
Got it. Okay. And the uniformed security, are they armed?
Actually, that's not a condition of the CUP. Maybe I could defer to the applicant, and they may have some more information on that.
Have there been any complaints from citizens?
No,
or
they've
any-
not generated any complaints in the last 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
No accidents at the lead?
That, I guess I have to defer to the applicant on that. I did not explore that specifically for this application. Maybe the applicant has some more information on if there have been any accidents. Staff's not aware of any, but I can't state that there have not been any.
Okay.
You mentioned,
Go ahead.
you mentioned also the drain field was small, so is that something they're going to improve upon? I think you kind of said something about the drain field. If you could clarify
Yeah,
that, please.
all of these, typically for these events, when they're going to have, people are going to congregate here, it's going to exceed the capacities of the drain fields. And most of these are going to be on a septic system. So they're going to have to get a health department permit. This site is a little bit unique from some of the other sites because prior to the school, they had some business activities here. They've had the school operation. So for whatever reason, their drain field capacity is probably a little larger than some of the other ones. So that's why there's a little more nuance, has a little more, some thresholds in it. But at the end of the day, most of these activities, most of these venues are bringing in porta potties, and they have to do that as part of the health department permit.
All right, thank you.
To be clear, they can legally have 700 guests, but parking is limited to 56? Is that what I saw?
Well, that's the minimum required parking. They also have to have an overflow parking area, and they do sort of have an overflow parking area.
Any other questions? Thanks, Tom. Would the applicant like to speak?
Do you have any questions? We're kind of low-key, we're a Montessori school. We don't want to make any changes, it's a very.
Why don't you come up anyway and just, if you're gonna introduce yourself and.
I'm Tamara Adams, I'm the owner of the school, actually it owns me. We've been operating now for quite some time. It started, I'm the mother of 12 kids, homeschooled all my kids. And then when they started growing up and I recognized a need, we opened it up to friends and family first. And then neighbors wanted to come. And so it's kind of how it took a life of its own. And when I first opened up the school, it was like jumping off the high dive and finding out if there was water in the pool, and there wasn't. And so that's really how the wedding business came about, so we could supplement the income for the school. So the little kiddies leave on Friday, the brides come in, the brides leave, the kids come in, and that's kind of how it's been going for the last few years. We do some really nice work. Our kids are outside every day. We don't have any plastic play equipment. They play with sand and caterpillars and trees and things like that.
And you've had no problem with traffic issues?
We had a lot of problem with traffic issues, but none related to the school.
Okay.
And there was a fatality that I had written about that and predicted and anticipated that happened a number of years ago. I was really active with VDOT, and everybody was very supportive, and they put up a lot of signage and lighting, and that kind of helped everything. So there have been no accidents related to the school.
Or
Or to
wedding
the- or to the
events,
No,
activities?
sir, not to my, I mean, an ambulance came because somebody bumped their head on concrete once, but that's the only thing I'm aware of.
As far as attendance, what is your numbers now for the school?
The school's about 50. I like to keep it that way. I have 14 kids in my class. That's what I'm used to, because that's how many, taught 12 at home. So we try to keep it very slow and personal, but we do an exceptional job. A lot of our children go to Governor's School or Blue Ridge. We work really well with the county. The highest occupancy we've had has been hosting Goochland County's high school prom, and we've done that a few years. And so we like to do things like that for the county.
Do you foresee it going past the 100 then for that traffic study?
No,
Okay,
I don't.
okay.
No. Not post-pandemic, anyway.
Do you also see, Ms. Adams, the wedding business growing further or growing exponentially over the next
No,
few
not
years?
really.
Kind of leveling out? Or?
I think it's kind of leveling out. We could if we want, but that's not my whole objective in having the weddings was to support the school, not for the schools to support the weddings. And so, and it's very stressful because I manage all of it, and it takes a lot out of you, but it's real important for these children and their education. I mean, we have kids, I have one of my former 15-year-old students is now, she's 15, she's at the Governor's School, and she's teaching teachers how to teach at the age of 15. And that's kind of fun to sit back and watch and, just have that ability to transform lives like that. Our school, they go fishing, which is really nice. We haven't changed the footprint. We revamped all the properties that were there as best we could. You're welcome to come visit if you'd like to do that. But they go fishing all the time, and they all have their little fishing poles. It's part of their school supply list. Everybody has to have a helmet, because if they climb the tree and fall, they need to protect their little heads. So I don't see a lot of increase. We don't really advertise it very much for the weddings. It's just if somebody comes by, his daughter got married. And so it's nice to have that opportunity to do that, and that's why I wanted to keep the 700 mostly, not for weddings, because we only had one really large wedding, and that was not a lot of fun. But it's nice to have it to give back to the community, such as the Goochland High School prom. And so that's why I didn't want that to change, because I don't want to lose that opportunity to give back to the county.
See, you taught us a lot.
Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Any questions? Sorry, yes. Open case to the public. Okay. I'll make a motion to approve. The commission recommended approval of the conditional use permit CU 2024-00007 for a school, bed and breakfast, day camp, and public assembly place at 1655 Broad Street Road, subject to the imposed conditions as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on June 4th, 2024, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission. Our next public hearing item tonight is countywide ZOA 2023-2, application by Carrie Brian Hutcherson, Esquire, requesting to amend County Zoning Ordinance Section 15508 floor area ratio to provide that the maximum floor area ratio, FAR, be determined on a per-lot basis, or where a proffered or conditioned master plan has been approved through zoning. The FAR determination would be based upon the area within such master plan, whether or not such area includes a single or multiple lots.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. For the record, my name is Ray Cash. I'm Assistant Director of Community Development. Good evening, Mr. Ptuck, members of the commission. As Ms. Parker referenced, this is a code amendment that is an applicant request. The applicant will be here and has a presentation or would be available for questions. So to start, give you a little background. What our ordinance does provide is a maximum floor area ratio. It does have specifics within our commercial districts as well as our industrial districts. We also have it within our planned development park for multifamily. That's only in one location in the county. MPUD and our PUD, which are mixed districts and also planned unit development districts, does have an FAR ratio related to commercial uses. For the request before you tonight, staff has received opposition emails from 4 citizens on the original proposal, which I'll go through what the original proposal was and what's before you tonight. We've received an email from one citizen, a few emails, but I know that citizen, in addition, probably represents other citizens. There was a community meeting held on the application before you tonight, April 1st. 15 citizens attended. We've had 2 of the commission members were there, as well as board members Lau and Winfrey. The comments really related to the impact of the extra attic project adjacent to Parkside Village, of which the applicant was the original representative, and that was one of the cases used as an example. Impact on the rural character of the county, how the change is more developer-related, not economic development-related, unintended consequences, how it may be enforced, and impacts on other cases. The previous proposal was to eliminate FAR in the districts I showed you on the second slide. To remove the FAR requirement from commercial and industrial districts, the FAR requirement would still have remained within the RPUD and MPU districts, which are districts that are probably more appropriate for the balance of determining FAR. The proposal was presented at February 15th hearing. 1 citizen spoke in support and 5 citizens spoke in opposition to the request, noted concerns with removing FAR requirements, a lot, generally what we heard again at the community meeting on the new proposal. Following the public hearing, the applicant did request the item be deferred to tonight, and the deferral was approved by the Planning Commission. Again, since that time, the applicant has updated the application. I'll give you a little background on floor area ratio, what it is for those here and at home. Floor area ratio is really a item that's used to really discuss concerning the use upon a piece of property. And when you're talking about, it's really volume of a building most often. There's other type of use variations. The way it's used here in Goochland, as I mentioned, there is a maximum FAR, and it's determined by dividing the gross floor area of a structure by the area of a lot. And we have a clarification of what the GFA, or gross floor area, is. And we have generally this calculation, that's a simple formula, of take the building size, divide it by the area of the lot, and that's where you get FAR. Most often, as it is in our ordinance, that is a 0 point something, it's more a percentile versus in some of the more urbanized areas, you'll start having a positive number that's greater than the 0.4. The language that's being proposed tonight is an amendment to move from the consideration of when you look at the representation of FAR on a lot-only basis, what the proposal is to say, if we have a proffered conceptual and master plan that comes through a zoning action, that could be a rezoning, could be a conditional use permit, what have you, the gross floor area of all structures on the property would be determined by the area of the land within that project. So what would come before the Planning Commission, for instance, would be a master plan or conceptual plan showing generally the layout of the property. Within that, we would know what's the property that's being rezoned or subject to the conditional use permit, and what we would go forward based upon the conceptual plan. Any structures that come within the bounds of that conceptual plan would now be calculated for the FAR. So really the formula changed is, as you can see at the bottom, it went from building over lot area, now it's building collective GFA over the project area to determine FAR. So purpose of floor area ratio, it has a variety of uses. It's mostly utilized generally in more urbanized types of form of development. It's also utilized form-based code, incentive, or performance zoning, which I'll be happy to teach you about one day. Or development codes where areas are really intended for higher density. For instance, in a city, you would most often see that, or an area where the encouraging more development, so often it's used as a minimum versus a maximum. Because you have certain infrastructure investments, you have certain development goals. For instance, a TO district, or what they talk about is transit-oriented development. You want to have a maximum minimum FAR provision because you want to make sure the investment comes in there to equal what the investment was, encourage use of transit, look for opportunities for that. And then special districts where you have something where you really had a design area where you're encouraging a certain development pattern. Those usually come out when you have form-based codes and has generally specifics about how things relate and uses relate to each other. It's not very common in suburban development. So as we mentioned, here's the example. This is actually an example that comes straight out of our ordinance. It shows you the relationship of you have a 26,136 square foot single-story building on a 1.5 acre lot. So, wonders of wonders. It comes out that there's random numbers were chosen, and you end up with 0.4 FAR. Works the same if you do a two-story. So remember, for an FAR, it's based upon the square footage or floor area of the building, not, generally just the footprint. And so if you went to a two-story model, same square footage, but the floors are smaller, but combined, they meet the 26,136. You take the acre and a half, which is 65,340, divide it, and you end up with FAR of 0.4. FAR does have its uses, as I mentioned, in certain types of elements where you don't have other types of regulation that restrict or guide a lot. For us, we have a Euclidean type of zoning where you really have standard setbacks, buffers, parking. The idea is you sort of move uses away from each other, a clear distinction of where uses are. And within their own property, they have the setbacks so that you regulate relationship to the street and things like that. So FAR, if it was standalone, you end up with scenarios like you have here, where you would have a 0.5, where really it took up pretty easy, simple drawings that they use in this example is, half the lot is 0.5. So it shows that single story is taking up half the lot. If you took it to two stories, you basically come down, it's taking a quarter of the lot. Floor area ratio could, in a 2.0 scenario, you're covering the lot twice the size because you've got the two-story building that goes full to the lot boundaries. You could, of course, regulate that as you often see in other types of form-based codes that build off of that as you encourage the elevated FAR, but you also encourage relationship to the street. So in this scenario, you'd go for a 4-story, so you'd have more open space or other types of things on the lot. For us, when we look at floor areas ratio regulatory tool in Goochland, as I mentioned, it's really more of, it's used in addition to our standard regulatory tools that are most often in suburban and rural development. You have what's in the red areas are generally the setbacks that you have, and so commercial, you could have a 20-foot setback adjacent to another property. It buffers, most often is commercial or industrial adjacent to residential, those buffers. And then we have what is really one of the biggest eater-uppers, to be not a very fancy term, what utilizes a good area or percentage of a lot in a suburban environment is parking. We have a very suburban parking standard because we do not have alternative modes of transportation. There's also each of our commercial and industrial districts do have height restrictions as well as the setbacks and related things. Some of the districts where they do allow a taller height, there's additional setbacks provided if you go over a certain size here. And again, so part of these are the items that really sort of restrict the impact of the lot for scenarios we're talking about. So as project example, and again, in full disclosure, as we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, and we've been, the applicant has been open about it through the process, is the example project, which is development over, actually within the Parkside Village area here. So these two streets here have commercial uses up here, then also there'll be residential uses back and here leads into the Parkside Village neighborhood. This piece of property right here is a separate parcel that's originally zoned long ago, but is also currently proposed for a dance studio. We also look at this project that came forward together. Now, originally, this was commercially zoned for a shopping center. They came back through the permit process to ask to instead do a development that includes a mini storage use. It would also have an office use and proposed potential retail. There are limitations from the zoning case that restrict the types of uses for this to kind of minimize the impact that was negotiated through the zoning case with the public. It does have buffers, entrances, and the like that are part of the conceptual plan. So as far as it relates to the FAR, based upon the proposal that the applicant originally made, you have the biggest use is the storage. It's 3 stories in height through the conditional use, so it's allowed to go to a certain height. So it's about 86,000 square feet. An office, about 7,800 square feet, and a commercial, about 6,500. So when you talk about the total structures, we look at this as a single lot, because it is currently a single lot right now. Your FAR would come out to 0.399. So again, 100,352 square feet of building, 250,905.6 of square footage. Do the formula, 0.39 is the FAR. So the example that we also provide forward is, okay, this is a single lot. So from the perspective of the applicant, they recognized that they wanted to have the ability to subdivide this property within its current bounds of the project. It's often common in commercial types of development scenario, you end up without parcels. There's different scenarios. Sometimes there are lease agreements within the project thing. There's often opportunities where people may purchase the property, and that really depends on who the user is, how they would like to operate their portion of the business, or whether they own the building or lease it, or vice versa. So for this scenario, the applicant has proposed potentially this is how they would like to subdivide the property. When you break down the uses based upon the square footage of the individual lot, the FAR starts to change when you look at individual users. Not surprisingly, the storage use is large. Their 0.76 would supersede what the ordinance allowance would be for an individual lot of 0.4. But also works out that the other users go much below what the 0.4 FAR would be. But when you look at this as a project calculation, as you would expect, collectively, the property again gets back to the 0.399. So really what the proposal that's before you tonight is, to look at in a scenario that you have collectively the same FAR based upon the project depiction, project projection. Now, this one's a little bit simplistic when you think about it because we already had one lot and the project is still one lot. It will be subdivided, it's still the one project area from the original lot. What's often the case is when we have a rezoning or a conditional use permit comes through, it could be a consolidation or conglomeration of multiple properties. Because often you have the developer doesn't have control over all those pieces of property, but through the process, they seek to gain in the future control of those properties, but they're all from original different pieces. So when you look at it on a project basis and what is shown in that zoning case as the conceptual plan, which is what this developer showed here, you would be the same scenarios. What the ordinance proposes, no matter what they were to begin with or how you subdivide them in the future, collectively that project is subject to the district FAR. That's I guess as simple as I can try to explain it here. And again, it's for this opportunity, we did explain this this was brought up at a community meeting, so it was different than the original proposal that came before this body. This is a new request by the applicant on this. If you have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them, and also the applicant is here as well.
Questions?
Can you go into greater detail when you were talking about the commercial businesses that were on either side of that storage unit? Like what type of, I guess, permitted uses are there for those spaces?
So office was a permitted use, which is, for this conceptual plan, it's the piece with the, there we go. It's back here. If you see that back use, it's closer here. This was really proposed to be a retail use. There were other uses within the B1 that were basically called out and removed from the opportunity. In addition, for this case, for the retail, it was also removed from drive-through uses as well. So really, it could just
So
be
just to clarify, no drive-through
no
uses?
drive-through uses for this case.
Question about floor area ratio. Is it just inside area, inside walls? Is it just roofed areas? What are the restrictions on that?
So, yeah, it's in the definition. I'll take you back there. So it says areas floored within the inside perimeter of the exterior walls. And so you don't count like vent shafts, courts. You still count everything that's corridors, stairways, ramps, the thickness of the walls. So really, you're drawing a square around the building. If they have like interior courts, which
Right.
is, it's not mostly used in suburban, but if you think of more of a hotel-type use inside of a downtown area, that court may be excluded from the calculation of
Right, so
FAR.
it's walled and roofed,
Right.
so covered porches don't count.
Yeah, but, well, those are sort of exterior
Okay.
type things. So for this scenario, I would say that it's
Right.
interior. I wouldn't count like a just covered porch if it's not enclosed.
Okay, thanks.
And if the property was sold, let's say in the next couple of years, how would that affect the FAR?
So really, the conditions carry forward, just like previous case we were talking about for the Adams. The conditions would carry forward with this property, no matter who the owners are in the future. Should the parcel be subdivided amongst owners, each are still subject to the conditions of this case. So really, it comes down to allotment of FAR, comes down to the developer. For the scenario, it's, if you're the large anchor, then you're the one that's really maybe considering how it gets distributed amongst those. But all the conditions of the case, all the conditions of FAR would still carry forward across the board.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Applicant would like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Kerry Hutcherson, the applicant. And I just got the presentation from the community meeting we had up here because I thought I might need to refer to some things if you have any questions. But Mr. Cash did a great job of going through most everything that I would have wanted to present to you. I did want to just reiterate that this has been a process that's been going on for a while. I first started talking to the county staff about this, in probably January of 2023. And we've gone through a few iterations. At first, it looked like this might be an amendment to the zoning ordinance that the county staff might want to take on its own initiative. Then it seemed like there wasn't really time on the staff's hands to do that sort of thing. I said, I'll be glad to take it on. I was looking at a narrower type of amendment initially, and then the county staff said, well, the more we look at this, the more we think that we could probably remove the FAR requirement from all the commercial and industrial zones except for the MPUD and then residential zone RPUD. I said, that's fine. I'm going to go with the recommendations of the county staff. We got to the February 2024 Plan Commission meeting, and there were a lot of citizens who had concerns. They felt like this was just an overbroad amendment to the ordinance. There was a lot of concern about unintended consequences, and I get that and got that and said, I'm happy to defer the case, work on narrowing this down. We'll have a community meeting. We'll see if we can get some more comments from folks and try to address issues. And the issues that I heard coming up over and over were people were concerned about unintended consequences. They wanted some certainty as to what development regulations would be in place in connection with a particular rezoned piece of property. And that was why, with the new proposal, I decided it'd be better to just focus on, rather than removing the FAR requirement, tying it, if you've got a project like Mr. Cash was explaining, where you've got maybe multiple parcels within a project that are all rezoned at the same time and are subject to a proffered or conditioned concept plan, that the FAR requirement would apply to the entire project. And in that way, the concept plan that's approved through that zoning process could include all the regulations that we would want to include as a community including the applicant, the citizens, the county officials, setbacks, buffers, access areas, parking areas, building sizes and locations. We could have all of that set forth in a concept plan, and then there would be a level of certainty. People would know, even if this property is later divided into separate parcels, the boundary lines of those parcels won't matter, because overall the FAR requirement will be met. Overall, all of those parcels subject to that concept plan in that zoning case will have to abide by the conditions in that case and generally conform with that concept plan. And that'll give us all the certainty to know that we won't have some unintended, unexpected consequence that results from the development. And we did have some concerns that came up during the community meeting. People asked about, what would happen if a parcel within the project was sold off. I'm actually going to pull up a slide that I think is just helpful to have up while we talk about things. Mr. Cash mentioned some of this, and I'm just going to reiterate it because I think it's important. It was a good question the citizens asked, and I understand why someone would be concerned. Let's see if I'm not sure how to make there. Okay, so let's say somebody wanted to purchase, let's say these red lot lines were created through a non-residential subdivision plat. And someone wanted to purchase this lot over here. And then the purchaser realized, I'd really like a larger building on that lot. I'm going to come back to the county and apply for a building permit for a larger building. And some citizens were concerned, what happens now? Couldn't they exceed the FAR? And it was nice that we had Ray at the meeting. Mr. Cash was very helpful in explaining, that would be rejected by the county staff. That permit would not get approved because exceeding the size on that one lot would make the entire FAR project, FAR, no longer compliant with the zoning ordinance. There was another concern that, what if someone were to try to come back and amend the zoning or change the zoning regulations for just that lot? What would happen then? And there's a couple of issues that would come up at that time. One, if one of these lots was rezoned in a way that allowed for a greater FAR, well, these lots are still going to be subject to that original concept plan and FAR. And if they don't have this one here to balance things out, then there would be a compliance issue with the remaining lots. And that's, again, something that Mr. Cash confirmed the staff wouldn't support going forward. And I would hope that the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors wouldn't support that either. So we've gone through those scenarios and the what-ifs. I think we've gone through them pretty thoroughly at this point. And we keep coming back to what I think is the key to this is that requiring that if you have a proffered or conditioned concept plan, define your project area for an FAR regulation that is applied on a project-wide basis, then you've got all kinds of ways beyond just the FAR requirement that the county can regulate what gets built on a piece of property within a development project. So I've spent a lot of time going through some of the things that we've tried to address with this. Didn't really focus too much on the whole purpose of why we were coming forward with this amendment, but I think that's been expressed already. But just to reiterate, this type of scenario where you've got a development project that starts out with one developer buying a piece of land for a primary use, that's kind of the anchor use for the development, and then wanting to be in a position to potentially sell off portions of that initial property to other end users is very common in the commercial and industrial development world. And being able to utilize a project-wide FAR regulation would help to encourage more commercial development in Goochland. This is something that'll help balance the tax base. Right now, it's a pretty residential-heavy tax base. And it's something that where you're encouraging commercial and industrial development through your comprehensive plan, you'll have more opportunities in the marketplace for people to say, yes, we'd like to do business in Goochland County. So that seems like a good thing to me. From my perspective, I do have a lot of clients who do commercial and industrial work, so I'll be forthright about that. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll just wait and see if anyone from the community has any comments or questions and try to respond to those.
Anybody? Question?
Yeah, I have a question on this example, because that's really all this is. The amendment is not specific to this property, but for this
Right.
example, let's assume that the large building gets built, and then two other parcels are sold. There's still grass at that point. And then somebody wants to build a larger than this plan right here, a larger retail space. And that would affect then how large the office space could be. Can they do that, or does this plan square footage for these three buildings go with the, is it part of the project plan?
Well, this concept plan is pretty specific as far as building dimensions go. So that might be a question better answered by the staff. I'm not the person who enforces these, concept plans. But this is a concept plan that shows building dimensions. So if someone were to come to me and say, can I build this? I would say, I think you need to check with the county and make sure that they're not going to tell you, no, you have to build within the building dimensions that are shown on this concept
Well,
plan.
or two-story, you could actually stay within the building dimensions and exceed the floor area that's specified.
Right, and then you might have an issue with the floor area because if you exceeded the height, or if you had more stories, then your floor area would increase.
So my question is, does the square footage allocated to each of these three possible subdivided properties travel with that as they're
Yes,
sold?
yes,
And you say yes.
yes. That's the way that I read certainly this concept plan.
And the point is, in the amendment that it's proposed, do you feel like that's clear in that?
I do, and it's like any zoning ordinance. Any zoning ordinance is going to run with the land, as we say. So as it's transferred, those rules continue to apply.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Counselor.
Thanks.
I'll open the floor to citizen comment. Anybody who wants to come up, please, 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Rob Williamson. I live at 2262 Wheatlands Drive, Mannequin Sabbath. The big question to your question, which was very good, is how does it travel with the property? And I'll get to that in a second. This amendment is more preferred than going and striking a useful tool out of all the other commercial ordinances that exist. So that's one benefit. The other issue is if you look at the anchor, it has a .76, almost double the .4 for the entire project. So what it must do in order to achieve that far is to borrow from the other two. Now, in the future, there are going to be projects of 10 lots, 100 lots maybe. It depends on the size of, if they're going to do an industrial park, et cetera, or just a shopping center. So what's important to know is when one of the lots borrows from the others, what locks that in physically? What's the mechanism, the how? And then how does that travel? Because it should be clear to staff so they can track it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when the project hasn't been totally completed, but they want to carve out a lot. Now, that owner disagrees that he's locked in, so he starts a zoning action that's going to come back to this board to allocate more of the FAR to that particular lot, potentially. So there needs a mechanism in place to lock that in, and it travels, and it's clear to staff, it's clear to the commission, and it's clear to the Board of Supervisors. And that's the consequence or the concern that I have with this proposal. I'm not against it. Like I said, it's preferred rather than stripping away the requirement from the commercial and the business ordinances. But it needs to be clear, concise, and this body needs to be the gatekeeper for future projects that come before it, realizing that if they've had borrowed far from certain lots, that there's a clear understanding at the leadership level that there has to be a compelling argument to exceed that. It's because they may come back with a CUP request or a rezoning just for that one lot. So that's where it's important that it's communicated clearly and concisely. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Margaret Levitt, 7036 Ben Hall Circle in Parkside Village. The first thing I would like to say is that I appreciate the time that staff as well as the applicant has afforded us in this process to try and explain this and how it will affect our community. Because on either side of that is residential, 55 and older. This will affect us greatly. So we were very involved when Andrew Browning and Neil Farmer and Lawrence Leesfeld wanted to rezone this parcel. And we were open to the storage facility because it would be less traffic through our neighborhood. So I'm also concerned beyond this parcel is there's parcels ripe for development along Ashland Road that residents back up to, also along Johnson Road. And I'm being told that there's other tools relating to building height, parking, setbacks, and buffers that should protect our community. And I hope that's true. And I'm relying on staff and you all to be sure that we are protected, because these are retirement homes. So many people, especially in Section 5, who are now backing up to Johnson Road, which there's a parcel for B1 and M1, have invested so much in their back spaces. Those people who live along Shenfield Avenue have also invested in their back spaces. And I just can't imagine if there's a building that's maybe for warehouse space, which I cringe to even say that that would be put behind our residential community, looking down on our residents in their back spaces. I don't think any of you all would like that. And it's not something that we want either. So we're all for reasonable growth, reasonable development. But I sure hope those other tools are going to protect us. But here again, I appreciate staff's time as well as the applicant's time to hear our concerns and understand our predicament. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Close the citizen comment. Okay. Questions, discussions?
Comment from the original zoning ordinance to this one, I do think this is a good compromise. Listening to the citizens, I do appreciate coming back and saying, wow, there was some pushback, and this is now what we want to do. So I do appreciate, and personally, I do think it's a good compromise for all involved.
Thank you. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval as amended to zoning ordinance amendment ZOA-2023-00002.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
The motion to recommend approval passes on a 5-0 vote. This case will be scheduled for public hearing before the Board of Supervisors on June 4th, 2024, with a recommendation of approval from the Planning Commission.
We have 2 bylaws.
We have no old business. We do have other business.
Yes.
Our first item is our director update from Ms. Sherry.
Okay.
Good evening. In front of you is a list of past board meetings. We just had a board meeting 2 days ago in Sydney and Sydney, which was the case for rezoning over off Greenbrier. That was deferred at the board to the June meeting. The 2 electronic message board signs that went through the former commission, full former commission, with a 5-0 vote. That was also approved by the Board of Supervisors. In May, coming up in May, are the cases that was heard by the Planning Commission. Charles Staton, the Bright case, and Chris Germain. Those are all cases that were heard at an individual meeting. Plus, coming back to the board is the ordinance amendment for access management. That was actually deferred from the December meeting of the board. So coming up in front of this commission in May, we have a cell tower. We have a shooting range, which is actually a gunsmith who is testing guns at his property. We have a short-term rental. Actually, this is a renewal for a CUP that is adding some short-term rental as well as a family winery. A farm winery. I don't have my glasses on. They don't work in the distance rating. As well as a tasting room. And this would be a renewal to their public assembly place that they have currently on the property. That's Bandits Ridge. We have Cornelia Dandridge. He is going to be requesting a conditional use permit for a small contractor storage building. And then we have a medical office building proposed for Broad Street right there at Mills Road. And then below that, we have a series of community meetings going on. You all have a copy in front of you, but for the public, James Myers is going to be requesting a conditional use permit for an accessory family housing unit. This is on Shannon Hill Road. All of this is on our website, too. I do want to make sure I'm going through this very quickly. For those of you at home, please go to the Planning and Zoning website, and you will be able to find this. We have the Roderick case, which is another family housing accessory unit. The first one is a renewal. This would be a new one. Markel Eagle is proposing a subdivision on Rockville Road, and that is going to be held on at St. Matthew's Church in October 30th. I'm starting to not be, April 30th, I'm starting to not be able to see the screen. I didn't print it out, forgive me. And then there will be a renewal for a CUP by Beverly Thurston for short-term rental. All those dates and time, again, forgive me, are on the website.
Thank you.
Our next item is adoption of the 2024 Planning Commission bylaws. Ms. Jackson will go over the proposed changes to the bylaws, and they will require a motion and a vote.
Thank you, Ms. Parker. Good evening, Commissioners. Starting on packet page 37 is the Planning Commission's bylaws and rules of procedure. We go over these each year at our annual meeting and just do any updates from state code or that we found we needed during the year. A lot of these are just grammatical changes, but I'll just take the opportunity to go over some of the other changes we made. In section 2.1 here on page 1, which is packet page 37, you'll note we started our meeting tonight at 6:30, and we've recently changed the meeting date from the first Thursday to the third Thursday. So this reflects that, and also reflects that the meetings will start at 6 p.m. Starting next month. If you all approve, that's what we talked about, to align the start time with the same as the Board of Supervisors meeting start time. So that's the change in paragraph 2.1. Also, at the bottom of page 1, packet page 37, you'll see that the workshop is struck through, mostly because we moved the meeting time up. And what we did at the workshop was the director update that is now just going to be a part of the regular meetings. That doesn't mean we can't have workshops. We can just schedule them individually. And you can propose amendments to your bylaws anytime if we decide, hey, you want to meet at 5 or 4 or something crazy like that, and have one at every meeting. That's something that would be open for consideration. Page 2, it's just grammatical edits. Page 3, so now I'm on packet page 39. There's no changes to section 2.6.3 majority vote. I just wanted to point out it's something a little bit unique with land use cases. What it says here, the second sentence, when a motion is made to approve an item and a majority of members vote against that item, that's going to be considered a motion to deny the item. Because we're voting something up or down, and a positive motion is an approval motion, it's not going to be a failed motion. So just something to think about. We're not going to take a second vote on that. That's going to be action on the item, even though a majority voted against it. Not to be confusing, but it wouldn't work the same on a denial motion, because it's not a motion for approval. If 3 people voted against a denial, that would be a failed motion. Hopefully this never happens, just something to keep in mind. And then on the tie vote, at the very next paragraph, section 2.6.4, this has happened a few times. Maybe a member is absent and it's just 2-2. So the procedure here in your bylaws is if there's not another motion, a tie vote, no action is taken. If there's not another motion either to approve or deny it, it'll just automatically be rescheduled for the next meeting the following month. That happens one time. If it happens again at the second meeting, the rescheduled meeting, then of course you can take another vote. But if no other vote passes, it will be moved on to the Board of Supervisors with the tie vote report. So again, no changes to that. I was just pointing that out as something a little bit unique with land use cases. At the bottom of page 3, there's some red lines there. That just clarifies, it's not a change, but you have 70 days to take action on a case once you first hear it. And it just clarifies that's the first time a meeting hits your agenda for the first time. But if it were like an applicant deferral, like the FAR ordinance was tonight, that doesn't count. So that got deferred for 2 months, 60 days, but tonight was really the that didn't count against any of the 70 days, so. But I'm glad you passed it instead of having to defer it. We didn't have to think about that. All right, so on page 4, again, it's just the order of business, so we took the workshop out again. Nothing substantive. Nothing substantive again. Until we get to page 6, section 3.1, proffer submission deadline. We clarified that, we didn't clarify, we did change that. That used to be the Tuesday, proffers are something an applicant would offer with a rezoning case. And we liked everything to be in the packet before it goes out that you all get before your meeting, so you review the meeting. The way it was written previously, they could change their proffers up to the Tuesday before the public hearing. Well, our public hearings are on Thursday, so they could change their proffers up to Tuesday, which would be after the packet was printed. And the public wouldn't see that, and nobody would have, you guys wouldn't see it in your packet. It gets really confusing. So we changed it to 7 business days prior to the public hearing, which is enough time for us to review it and get it in the packet before it goes out. So we hope you think that's a good change. We think that's a good change. And that matches the same deadline as the Board of Supervisors has. It's all about transparency and getting things in the record. Yep, no other substantive changes, I think. Let me page through to the end. Yep. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Again, these are your bylaws and rules of procedure. Everything's subject to, be waived by the chair about a time limit or something like that. These are your rules to govern you if you see something, and we can always amend them. I think it says in here, if you want to propose an amendment, you circulate it to the other commission members at least 5 days in advance. So it'd be something you'd probably want to do before the next meeting so we could put the actual change, just like this, in a meeting packet for everyone to see.
Everybody good? Okay. I move the commission to adopt the planning commission bylaws and rules of procedure as presented.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Our final item tonight is adoption of the 2024-2025 Planning Commission meeting calendar. On the last page of your packet, you will find the proposed Planning Commission meeting calendar. As Callie mentioned, as proposed, it will remain the third Thursday of the month. The calendar reflects the new proposed 6 p.m. start time adopted in the bylaws to be consistent with the Board of Supervisors meeting. And adoption of the calendar does require a motion and a vote.
So our next meeting would be a 6 o'clock start
Correct.
in May.
Correct.
May, yep.
Any questions? I move that the commission adopt the resolution establishing the Planning Commission's 2024-2025 meeting schedule as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Any other business?
No, sir?
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I motion that we adjourn this meeting of the Goochland County Planning Commission on April the 18th, 2024.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sir?